Good. Dwight, thanks for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for
Fi-
having me, Casey.
15 years. So I was thinking about the 15 years, and I think of the first 4 years
Right.
as sort of like, I don't know, phase one. I don't even know what you call it, right? So that was 2006. You were a senior at Millersville University, if I remember
Yep.
correctly. You were
That's
you were
right.
were you interning with White Wolf Security, or were you a
Yeah.
full-time employee at that point?
No, no. So when this started, I was still interning with White Wolf Security with Tim Rosenberg. So this was just one of my projects as an intern. He had gotten hooked up with you and decided that he was going to do that. You guys were both going to do this collegiate cyber defense competition thing, and he said like, oh well, why don't you make one of your projects writing a scoring engine for this thing and explain the whole process and what it was going to look like. And so that was just one of the things that I worked on, and I remember now. It's so terrible to think of back on that first version of the software. But I was playing around with Perl a lot at the time, and I really liked Perl. And so I decided, well, that's what I know. I'm going to write it in Perl, and it was just all these individual functions, and I had never built anything like that or anything to that scale. But luckily, that first version, or the very first 2006 edition of the CCDC, it was a lot smaller than it really became. So we only had a few systems and a few services per system. And, the scoring engine was just that. It didn't handle any of the injects or all the stuff that the scoring engine later evolved to handle. But yeah, that first version was all just, it wasn't even threaded. It was just, it ran through the checks for all the teams straight down the line and just checked whether things were on or off. And then it wrote that stuff to a database, and then it pushed out the results so that we could look at them. But it was just such a simple thing, this simple thing that I wrote in probably, a month and a half or 2 months just to support this first competition. And then obviously it ballooned from there and became this kind of huge thing that the CCDC is today, where, this scoring engine was rewritten probably two or three other times, by me and by the team. And there was just, it really expanded greatly. And I was much more proud of the later scoring engines than I was of that first Perl-based engine. But it was effective, and it gave us the scores we needed. So,
Did the job, right?
yeah, exactly. It did what we needed. And so that means that I guess in some way it was good. But like if I looked back on that code today, I'm sure I would just like hide my face in shame
Yeah,
at the way
well,
we
we
made that thing.
I mean, if you look at a lot of what we had to cobble together, I think we would be put in the penalty box and be shamed. So okay, so a couple things. That first 4 years, we were bouncing back and forth between Burl Business Park in Lancaster, year
Yep.
one. That was 2006. Then the next year we went to Damon's in Hunt Valley, right, North
Right.
Baltimore County, in the
Yep.
in the in the banquet room, the 22,000 square foot banquet room, and
Yep.
then we went back in 2008 to White Wolf Security, and then 2009 back to Damon's, and that was sort of, I consider that sort of whatever, like phase one.
Yeah.
We were lugging desktop PCs and
Yeah.
CRT monitors, and right, and we had Mike Doherty, who was a student at the Community College of Baltimore County, building network infrastructure. If I'm not mistaken, we were also you all also in that first year were relying on some network Nessus attack scripting language. Remember the NASL
Yep.
to do maybe some like service checks or something. There was some Nessus attack scripting language stuff
Yeah,
going
there
on.
was some of that just kind of mixed in. Like we kind of had two separate things. We had the scoring engine that would do some of our scoring, and then a separate Nessus engine that was just doing like the uptime for the teams. So it was just showing the teams what they had up, but we didn't use the Nessus to actually generate your score. We had the scoring engine separate for that. So it was a weird, like we were doing two sets of checks, one for visualization of the teams and one for the actual like record for us to score off of. Yeah,
Incredible.
it was a really interesting kind of setup that we had. Yeah, I also remember those first few years we didn't have enough equipment. I don't know if you remember that one either. I think it was year two at Damon's. We had to ask the teams like, "Hey, do you want a Cisco firewall or do you want or, or are you okay with a Linux-based box? And, every team that wanted Linux, or sorry, not Linux, Cisco, we gave a Cisco. But if teams said like, oh, it doesn't matter, then we didn't have enough Ciscos for everyone. So we gave them like a PF Sense box or something that was their firewall. Like, I still remember that. And we luckily, enough teams said like, oh, I don't care. Or I think we had a couple that preferred PF Sense or Linux. So like we gave that to them and they were happy. But yeah, it was definitely, that was an interesting one where like I had my fingers crossed. Like, what if everybody wants a Cisco because their universities do Cisco training? Like, what do we do? And everybody's like, well, fingers crossed. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And luckily, we didn't have to.
Luckily, I know I was going back looking at various files over the years because on Twitter I've been posting just highlights from the different years, and so I would find these that year the equipment list, and
Yeah.
it was, and I had to cobble together those devices from like 4 different schools. It's like Dale Schnapp from Howard Community College gave me 3, and it's unbelievable. So, but essentially, let me ask you, were you involved? So, in addition to the scoring engine stuff, were you involved in the building of the assets at all, installing OSs or applications or any of that part, or was that mainly just Tim?
So it was mainly Tim, but I definitely helped out some. So it was more, I'm going to say it was like 80-20. So 80% of it was like Tim and I would get together and kind of, we would brainstorm out like, what does this network look like? Like, what do we want to have in it this year? And that's based a little bit on like, okay, we're doing banking. Like, okay, what would our fictitious bank have? Okay, well, it's obviously got Windows servers and Active Directory servers and mail servers in Exchange. Like, that's great. And then we would have to come up with like, what other applications can we install that makes sense to run on, a bank or at a hospital or whatever our specific thing is. And then we would just brainstorm. And sometimes it was like, oh, it's e-commerce, so let's just find Magento or something that's like open source that we can just throw in here that we don't have to pay for a license, which was, a big part of it. Like, we don't want to have to pay for this. We want to have something free that's open. The open source was also nice because it gave the red team guys a way, like, okay, they can also turn this into source code auditing a little bit, as with, instead of doing reverse engineering, we could say, okay, it's open source, maybe there's some vulnerabilities, at least they can look at the code, make it a little bit easier on the red team. So we would kind of brainstorm out and just figure out what do we need. And there were some things that were always in there, like, we always have an Active Directory environment that's necessary. PBX became a big thing. We want to do communication, so why not have PBX? Every big business is going to have some kind of phone system. So those kind of things just made sense, and they went into every build.
Mail server, database, right? Web server. They were the usual suspects, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we would change like versions. So it wasn't always the oldest version we could find. We would get newer versions and things like that. So, it wasn't always just because you were here last year, you'll recognize all the systems, because that would have been, a big one up to all the returning teams. So we tried to keep it fresh. We tried to rotate things, but I mean, you kind of always could have guessed, like, there's probably going to be web servers, there's going to be mail servers, like database. Those things are always going to end up in there. So after we kind of came up with, just a big, broad picture, Tim would kind of run off and let's build those VMs, let's orchestrate it so that we can deploy them quickly. Let's make sure we have snapshots set up so that we can restore for the teams if they ask for them. And then I would start building out the scoring engine and say, okay, what do we have this year that we didn't have previous years that I need to be able to check? Like, okay, this is a Magento server. How do I log into that and verify that it's up? I'll build out the scoring engine. And then when I had my piece pretty solid, I would jump over and help out that 20% with Tim, where I would build out those open source servers, or he would need help just kind of adding in 10,000 users into the Active Directory database. Like, I could jump in and build a script that would run that for him. So those were my contributions to building. I kind of helped out. We both really worked on that initial build out and, figuring out what is it going to look like. And then he would do most of the building, and I would jump in at the tail end after I had the scoring engine, kind of where we wanted it.
Awesome. So then 2010, this was sort of a transition year, because I don't know if you remember the gentleman from SAIC with his son and daughter that showed up that second time at Damon's, and he said, you all have something going on here. I think you should come run this event at a real place, not a steak joint banquet hall. And he was right. We should have, and we listened. And so we ran it in 2010 at SAIC, and that facility was brand new. That was the year Larry came on board. Him and Paul Astor, and they built the physical access control systems. And then so that was sort of a transition year. And then 2011, we went to APL, Applied Physics Lab. And so talk a little bit about, so sort of APL on, how did the scoring engine change, and just anything else is sort of, what sort of stands out as you think about that, however many years that is,
Yeah.
8, 9 years.
Yeah, that was definitely, you're right. That was like phase two.
Yeah.
Phase one was kind of bouncing around and us trying to figure out, like, get the wheels onto this thing that we're trying to build and figure out how it even works. And then we transitioned and we went to APL. And yeah, APL is such a, I mean, you don't even have to say it. Like, it's such a huge step above like a Damon's or even like the White Wolf space, which was big. But APL is so great. Like, it's got a professional crew. It's got people to help you, build out everything and just get it set up, which was amazing. But yeah, so the scoring engine, that was really where we started to like build this out. Like, that was where the White Wolf kind of model of like running events for people was starting to take off. So that was when I started to turn the scoring engine into, initially it was a CCDC only thing, but we wanted to turn it into a more generalized version of the scoring engine that could be used to run any kind of event, any kind of corporate event, capture the flag type of event. So that's what we were going for. And even back then, I don't remember when CTFD or Facebook CTF, their engines came out. I'm pretty sure it was after that. So this was before you couldn't just roll out an easy CTF framework. So that was part of what I built too, a way to just have a red only CTF instead of the blue CTF, which is what or blue versus red CTF, which is what the CCDC really is.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a lot of changes where I was making it more generic, and I was making all the tests like into modules that were standalone so that other people could potentially like give me modules to just run for me, so I didn't have to build out every test myself. We started to build out, keeping the injects inside the engine as well. So we really the view, we never really achieved this grand view, but the idea was that we would have all the points inside one engine, because even at APL, I remember you running around with all the paper printouts, and you're like, okay, these are the injects are paper printouts, and we have another spreadsheet here for when we do the CEO interviews, which was Costas initially, and then we kind of had other people rotating in there. But at the end of the day, there were just these stacks of papers, and everybody's like going and double checking them and putting all the points into a spreadsheet so that we could orchestrate all this, get it all together, organize it, and it was just so, I remember it being so painful. And I remember thinking like, this should all, like, we already have a database. Why isn't all this stuff just in a database? Why do we use an Excel spreadsheet? So I started to build out and say like, okay, well, we can put the injects inside the engine. We can keep track of the scores inside the engine with the database. We really wanted everything in there, and we never got quite to that point, for various reasons. But that was really like a growth phase for the scoring engine. And sometime around then, maybe you can help me. When was it that the national scoring engine started to provide that engine, and we would kind of compare the two of them and just see like, which one should we do this year? Like, is the national engine, does it have as much as we want? Or, because I remember they were doing development as well, and their initial versions were very scoring centric and didn't have injects. So we held off initially because our scoring engine, was doing a little bit more, and it made it really, really useful. So we decided to stick with that. Do you remember when?
I don't honestly. The one we're using now, so the Midwest folks, they're running our region this year, and we have a dashboard. It's called the Inject Scoring Engine. It's a weird name because it's really essentially allows you to manage, create, edit. There's no cron scheduling capability, so you have to manually start and stop injects, but it's got a really nice interface for managing injects, and it does the service scores. We've been using that, and it's a variation of the national CCDC engine, and it's not bad. I actually really like the inject functionality of it. It was written in PHP. For the reason that you're talking about, right? We had Carrie all those years as our inject lady, right?
Yeah,
and shoveling paperwork around. I mean, I have great memories of us sitting, at the table wherever we hold up, and me with an Excel spreadsheet, and you like feeding me, give me the update, and you with your Mountain Dew and your Swedish fish.
Yep, exactly.
your sustenance. So and then you said there was a team working on the scoring engine. What does that mean?
So that was Justin Ray when we brought him on. So Justin was, a student at CCBC with you, and he was a competitor for, a number of years, and he kind of wanted to get on board with us. So for the longest time, it was just me writing all this code. But then once we started to kind of branch out, there were some other people who were interested. Eventually we hired Justin, and he was kind of the second developer there. And we also, for a very short time, we had Ben Heisey on as well, and he was kind of helping out with that sort of stuff. So yeah, that was really like, the team was mostly Justin and myself doing the coding, and then there were other people who like fed in ideas or fed in, just other pieces and helped out with the framework and maybe the automation pieces, but not the direct coding part. But yeah, I mean, us at White Wolf was always a small team. It was mostly Tim and I. Justin came on for the last two or 3 years and really helped out with coding as well. I mean, it's hard to be the only coder on a project, so it was really nice to get some extra help and have somebody else both contributing ideas and contributing code as well to help us really branch out with this thing. But yeah, when Justin came on, that was when he really helped me like beef up the multi-event piece, which was the ability to like have all of our events in one database. So the way it was before that, we would have every database was one event. And when I was done, I would like dump that database so I would have all the data. But when I ran the next big event, I would just start with a fresh database. And so there was no way to like correlate or compare between different years or different events or any of that stuff. So I really wanted to put this thing in so that way we could do graphing and trending, and we could do things like, let's select all 4 of the last CCDCs and see what teams came out on top, and it would show us all on one graph. So like, it seems like a really simple thing, but the idea of getting it all into one database was a huge task, and to be able to then take the old events and import them in so that we could have everything in one centralized database. If you had built it with that idea in the beginning, I'm sure it would have been a lot easier, but kind of bolting it on later on and making it all work was incredibly complicated, but it was really worthwhile. At the end, I really loved the graphs that we got out of it, all the information that we could pull, the queries that we could run that were just impossible, during the first, I don't know how many years, probably 5 or 6 years of CCDCs, where really each event was its own little isolated piece. Like, I could tell you who won in 2006 and 2007, but I couldn't tell you what how any individual player did, or, how the teams really trended between the two without manually crunching all those numbers, which is obviously very painful.
Yeah. It's interesting. So what, as you think about the APL years, right? What sort of stands out for you? What's present for you?
Yeah, I think the APL years was really when the rest of the competition took off for me. So before it was really kind of, I would hide in the back, which I tended to do the whole time. I mean, that's where I wanted to be. I just wanted to be like sitting in the back and watching all the numbers flow across and make sure everything was good. But, before, that's kind of only what I did. But once the APL years came around, that's where we got it became like a big event. We had like educational things added on there for the kids. We had the speakers. I feel like that was when we got we did drones as the activity one year. We did Larry's radio station outside for the amateur radio one. Yeah, we did robots a few times. We did big robotic build kind of things for all the teams. That was when we people got more interested. Before that, we had we had Larry and Paul, and they were kind of involved. But this was when we had big audio video setup. We had consistent coverage for the entire time for people who wanted to join the stream, and so it just seemed like a huge step for me. It was this big event that we were going down and participating in, rather than just being a weekend at Damon's Steakhouse. Sure, that it was fun. It was a lot of fun to be there, participate, and do that. But it doesn't seem like the same level as APL, where it's this huge thing, multiple rooms, AV, speakers, all these different things kind of coming together, and really made it seem, kind of like a B-Sides event now. A B-Sides is the same scale of what I I think of it as APL.
Uh,
You know, you go in and there are a bunch of sponsors, people trying to do hiring, you know, trying to hire some of the students to do outreach there. There's people over in the auditorium giving presentations and doing talks. Like it was great. It was like this huge thing. And that's what stood out. Everything else, like all the craziness that we had to go through, like getting set up, running cables, you know, like making sure it all worked, making sure the food was going to get there for all the students. Like that's a part of it too, but that's kind of like in the background. Like what I remember is this big event that we built from scratch and made into this, you know, like huge thing that people looked forward to and came to every year. Like that's what I loved about it. And
awesome.
it was so great.
Thanks for sharing. That's great. Yeah, there is a lot of longevity. I mean, we still have, you know, I handed off the reins to Lewis Leitner after running it the first
Right.
7 years so I could, you know, help grow the National CyberWatch Center. And, you know, and it morphed and it changed. I mean, he got 3 national champions. You know, we never got a national champion under my leadership. So the Millersville team got second a couple years, the first 2 years nationally, right? And Lewis did a fabulous job, really, of also, you know, with the sponsorship piece and really making it, you know, this is the first year that we have not relied on National Science Foundation grant funding to pay for the event, right? And that's really
That's awesome.
that's hats off to Lewis for, you know, really, you know, running a quality event, you know, but also keeping costs low, which is important, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Larry used this word. He talked about it. The event is hyper realistic, right? And, you know, condensed, super intense, all these competing sorts of tasks and competing and oftentimes confusing or information that didn't make sense and you know, being dragged in 4 million different directions, you know, being somebody shoving a microphone in your face and wanting to interview, right? There's all this stuff going on. And I've heard people refer to events like the CCDC in a derogatory way as they use the term like toys and games, right? You know, sort of looking down on it, you know, and, you know, how would you respond to that sort of criticism of the event?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's an interesting question, and I think there is a little something to Larry's description of it as being hyper realistic. And I think so. No event is going to be perfect for everybody. So criticisms are totally fine, you know, across the board. You know, like some people love CTF events, some people love attack and defense like CCDC, and some people hate these kind of events. You know, there are some students that I know didn't have a great time, and it's not because we put on a bad competition. It's just because like this isn't like it really is a stressful event, and our whole idea when planning these events, and I think yourself included, is to stress the students and let them see, you know, like how stressful things can be. So I think if I can for a second address realism versus hyper realism, I think our idea was, you know, the idea for a CCDC is the entire security team for a fictitious company has all been fired and your team has now been brought in to handle it. So you can think of yourselves as, you know, a team of contractors or the new team of scabs being brought in, whatever, however you want to think of it. The idea is everybody that used to do this job is gone and you're now doing the job. And we're trying to fit in this whole, you know, disaster recovery piece into a 1.5 day competition. And our idea was we want to give you, the student, as much of a realistic, you know, feeling as we can, but really all the stuff in a CCDC would happen over weeks. You know, like you don't come in and all of a sudden you've got, you know, APT attacker, you know, banging down your door at the same time. You have to reset passwords for your users and you're being called into meetings, like all those things, you know, assuming your entire team got fired and then a new team came in, it wouldn't all happen in a day and a half, right? There would be weeks of meetings and follow-ups and all that stuff, but we don't have weeks for a competition. And it's no fun to make a competition be weeks long. You know, that's basically a job. So what we were doing was really like compressing this all. So I think all of the scenarios that we did were meant to be realistic, not necessarily real. And we did things like, you know, a ticket came in and you have to change the passwords for these people, or you have to update your website. Is that realistic? Absolutely. Those things happen every day. Those tickets are going to come in. Will your team necessarily be the ones to do all that? Probably not. But then again, maybe it depends on the size of the organization. So yeah, I think all of the things were meant to be realistic. The hyper-realism comes in just that compression of time. But the compression was meant to increase the stress to really make the students perform. And that was what we were trying to get out of them. So yeah, like if my response to, is this a toy, is this a game? I mean, a little bit, in the sense that a toy and a game are really meant to boil down a concept and focus it into a short amount of time. And that's what we were doing. Is this realistic? Are you ever going to go into an organization and have this exact thing play out? No, absolutely not. I mean, it would be crazy. And I imagine all the students would just quit on their first day if this were a job, but but it's a competition, and we're trying to push people to do their best. And, we want the team leader to really step in and be a team leader and kind of organize things. And we wanted people to be able to say, we don't have time to do that inject, so we're just going to ignore it and lose the points for that. Totally fine. It's a valid choice that you have to make even in your day-to-day job. So yeah, like I think there's criticism, and I think it's not for everybody, and some people wouldn't enjoy it, but I know that there are tons of people who love them. And I think the people that really enjoyed it and got a good experience out of it, really validated for me that we were headed in the right direction. There were definitely things that we could change and improve. And every year, I think we tried to make changes and make improvements, and we could have continued, forever to tweak things and make things better, but I think another one of the things is we got a lot of criticism about things being too hard, and I don't ever think we made it too hard. We made it very stressful, but I think the level of difficulty was where we wanted it to be, and we wanted to push people, and the people that came back the next year and were much more prepared and had a better, battle plan to go in there, a better strategy. I loved seeing that, and I think it was great. And I think there was a lot of growth to be had just participating in the event in that way.
Interesting. It's a great distinction between realistic and real. I am going to respectfully push back, because ever since 2013, the country of Pakistan has provided a constant APT threat. So
That's true.
They're still around. This year is, did I tell you about this year's scenario?
No.
It's so the company is Artificially Intelligent Institute, I.
Okay.
And so like the eye, and see the eye watching you.
Oh,
so,
nice. Yeah.
By the way, do you want a black, white, or red T-shirt?
Oh man, I'll take a black one. That one looks really good. I like that one.
Yeah, and so I is a multinational with regional offices in the Mid-Atlantic region, as you can imagine, and they sell AI software. They've got a number of patents with some software that does some machine learning stuff, and they sell that to government entities, primarily the intelligence community and law enforcement agencies, and then they have a host of private sector companies. So the whole thing was going to be this combination of like IoT, these dumb devices that were running some machine learning software. Of course, we didn't get to really have the on-prem piece, right?
Yeah.
Because of COVID-19.
Yep.
But Pakistan is still around, and state sponsored, and they've expanded now. It's not even just the country that supports. They have contractors now that support them. So
nobody ever does anything about these guys. It's terrible. They're always around.
Where's Fire Eye and Mandiant when you need them, huh?
It's really funny. I forgot until you mentioned the Pakistan thing that there really was a discussion the first couple years. So initially it was just, we would say, well, the red team is just independent attackers. And then later we decided, like when APT became really a big buzzword, because initially in 2006, APT didn't really mean anything. Like we didn't really have that terminology at the time. So when that came around, we decided like, oh yeah, we should have state-sponsored hackers. And I remember the discussion. I think you were involved, and Tim, and we were like, well, we should make Russia the attacker. And then like, oh wait, well, we should make China the attacker. And there was this discussion about like, well, that's not really good. That's not real PC to pick one of these countries just because they're in the news, and like, that's not really a good thing to do. And for a number of reasons. And then we're like, oh yeah, and now we're gonna have to pick every year and decide like who's the one that's really in the the public eye as being the one behind all the hacking this year. So it really was this thing like, okay, well, let's just pick Hackistan. And I know that we're not the only ones who do that. I'm pretty sure like the US government, like the military for their exercises, they use Hackistan a lot. It's just one of those things where you can, say, okay, it's a nation state actor, but we're not going to name any names. We're not trying to make any political statements. It's just, a heavily funded nation state actor coming after you. And we don't have to say any more than that. But I remember having those initial discussions about like, who are they? What do we call this, attacking group? All those kind of discussions.
It's wild because you said that, we didn't have that term APT when we started, right? And think about, one of the, when I think about sort of the MACCDC, I think of it as you described it, almost, the metaphor is a Christmas tree, and that was the competition. Then we started hanging all these ornaments and, the symposium and the K-12 piece and right in the job fair, as you mentioned. So, but think about, one of the other things that's made it, I think, so special is all of the technologies, right? So one of the goals of a CCDC is to expose students to technologies that they're not seeing in the classroom. And it's wild to think about, it might have been 2000, it might have been that first or second event at Damon. So maybe 2007, 2009. It was hot. We had the first IPv4 v6 dual stack systems. It's like, whoa, that was so cutting edge. And we had SCADA, right? We had a control system that effectively was monitors plugged into this control system that was, I think, a Java app that Tim wrote or something. And then the red team figured out how to hack it, and they could bring down, power, which turned off monitors. But, there was all these sorts of tech. I mean, you guys had fleet management one year. Remember, there was I don't know if that was the Cyber Blizzard one, but there was some sort of either natural or man-made disaster one where there was there's all this sort of stuff that the students really must have hated you guys. I mean, because it really did fulfill on that goal, right? Of exposing them to stuff they weren't getting exposed to. And, not to brag or anything, but, you guys really were always choosing technologies that they were really sort of ahead the curve always.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think the students probably hated a lot of that stuff, which is, it's so sad because that was what we really enjoyed building the most. Like, we loved making that stuff. And I know it's a little self-serving, right? To say like the part that the students probably hated is the part that we loved the most, but it was really what made it like stand out, totally. That we wanted to play with new toys as well. And we were hoping like, hey, this will make it fun for the red team because they get to play with stuff. How often outside of some specific ICS red teamers, how often do you get to play with SCADA? So yeah, that SCADA box was like a real Schneider Electric, PLC board. It was inside a really, like simple box, but it was like a real logic controller that could go in a real SCADA situation. And then there was just Tim made that simple SCADA app that simple Java app to run on top of it. But yeah, like we really wanted to be, like I said, realistic, not real. Like nobody's going to run this silly Java app on their production PLC in a pipeline somewhere, but it's real hardware. It's just running Java. The same thing with like the radio when Larry brought those. Part of that was the badges were the radio transmitters. And so, they would constantly be talking over amateur radio frequencies. Like, yeah, like I hope some of the students enjoyed that and got a good time out of like playing with these things, because that was really what we wanted. We had Zigbee one year, we had the amateur radio stuff, we flew the drones around. We had those early drones before DJI came along and made everything kind of ubiquitous. We had those like much simpler drones, and at least that one, I know students loved that one. People want to fly the drones. It didn't matter if they crashed them into the walls because we had spares, like that one. I know they had.
That was awesome. Do you remember how Tim started the day one with that? We had
flying in.
Came flying in. So we were in the auditorium, and the AV crew, they took the video feed from the drone and they displayed it on the huge screen, and Tim, I think, flew that in, and that's how we started that year. That was killer.
It was so great. But yeah, it's that kind of stuff like that. We thought like this will this will be fun. Like, we didn't want it to be, you know, just a CCDC where you come in kind of just hack on computers for a while. You know, we wanted it to be something above and beyond, and that's how we thought we could separate ourselves from the other groups. You know, like, we're going to pick one piece of technology that hopefully people haven't gotten to play with, whatever that is, and we're going to let the students play with it, and we're going to let the red team hack on it, and we're going to see what we can do. You know, I think my big ideas were always ATMs and voting machines. We never got there, but I really wanted to, like, get ATMs off. I proposed that to Tim when we did the banking year. Like, what if we buy ATMs off of eBay? And he's like, I think that's going to be outside our budget to buy an ATM for every team. And I'm like, it'd be so great though. Like,
Larry wanted to have fake money spitting out.
Yeah, exactly. Jackpot attacks where money's coming out of these things. They would have been amazing. But yeah, and then shipping 8 ATMs to, you know, Johns Hopkins, APL, and rolling them in there. It
definitely outside of our budget. Dwight, thank you. First of all, thank you for just spending some time and reminiscing, sharing sort of your experience, but also just thank you for all the work over the years. It's you know, it's been a lot of fun, and best to you. And I got a t-shirt coming your way. The challenge coins are coming from China, so don't lick it when you get it, okay? As to quote Tim Rosenberg. I know it's shocking that he would say something like that.
That's good advice, though, so I appreciate it. And just in case I don't want it to slip and just happen. You know?
Yeah, not to make light of the COVID-19 pandemic, but, you know, that's the one thing I haven't heard in all the advice, right? It's, you know, wash your hands, of course, the physical distancing, right? But also don't lick your challenge coins. It should be so. Yeah, well, I'll add that to the MACCDC COVID-19 page, just so, you know, we sort of cover our, you know what.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We don't want people to get hurt, you know, because we didn't warn them about it. So
yeah,
definitely add on there.
Yeah. Take care. Thanks for everything.
Thanks, Casey. Yeah.
See you later.
See you later.
Bye-bye.